This is how we began this whole series, is listening to the rhythm of our heart. And I don't know if you can hear it, is the rhythm of the heart that's on right now. Yeah? And it is the rhythm of our heart, which is really very good for sleep when you listen to this sound. Yeah, it really allows something in us to kind of relax. And today, we are moving into the very core, the very inside layer or depth of this women's in the navigation system, the dark light rhythm, and how it really opens lands. It's present in a woman's body. And this is connected to a woman's womb and her womb rhythm. Yeah, so her menstrual cycle that begins somewhere around the age of 10, 11, 12. And through 16, it can be any of that time. And it goes on all the way into her 50s. So from 45 to 56 is the time when the waning can happen and the womb bleeding cycle kind of pauses. So from this very first day of bleeding to the very last day of bleeding, a woman's life is forever. Yeah, every single day is on this cycle. So it's the longest phase of a cycle happens. Her life happens on this rhythm, which is the being and the doing rhythm, constant, spanning across 28 roughly on an average, or it can range to 36 days, right? And so and the only time this rhythm goes off or pauses is when she gets pregnant, or there is some, or that's the only time in the natural way that the rhythm pauses is when she becomes pregnant for the 9 months post breastfeeding, and then slowly in another 9 to 10 months or 12 months is when she begins to bleed again. So this whole thing is so hormonal. It is very much connected to a woman's mental, emotional state, her health, her stress levels, especially the release of cortisol and adrenal in her body. So it is connected to so many factors, and it's almost like the ups and downs that keep happening. And bleeding is the time when all her those waxing and webbing of the hormones pause. It's stopped. So she comes into actually her normal body, where she's, but just that she's bleeding. Otherwise, bleeding, when she's in her bleeding, is when she, I feel, is in her authenticity. So what you experience that time, it is true, it is there in the body, but maybe hidden because of all the other hormonal movements. So women are experiencing excruciating pain, discomfort, anger, sorrow, grief during her bleeding cycle, then that is something that is very much present in her system. Yeah. And somewhere it goes absent during the other times because of the hormonal fluctuations. So it's important to really bring attention to it. So this is what we're going to look at. What is this compass, this innermost compass, which is so much inside the depths of a woman? So I'm going to go back to the use of the presentation, so to guide you through this compass and for you to kind of locate it within your own body bleeding cycle. So let's begin. Okay. So this is how we started this journey, right? This is the clock. So though in this particular one, I'm showing the life cycle at the center, it is not. It is actually the bleeding cycle. So we will see that in this one. And yeah. So just doing a recap here. So we began this journey from really becoming aware of the being, doing, being space, being to doing space, where we are actually beginning to move out into light. And then there is the doing in the world, doing space, activity, connection, collaboration, teamwork, and then again waning back into being space. This is this transition from activity to rest. Yeah. And we saw how this rhythm is very much in sync with plant cycles, animal cycles. Everything in nature is in sync with this movement. It doesn't resist it, it doesn't fight it, it aligns with it and moves with it. In the human consciousness or the human birth, we have this ability to go beyond it. While in it, we can go. It's like having an anchor, like when you're first learning to swim. I remember that, there can be ropes or something tied to the shore that you hold, and you are in the water. You learn, you may use life jacket, you may use something so that, you are becoming familiar with the rhythm of the water because you're so used to being on land. Actually, rhythm of the water is part of your body because you were born into water. So, a baby can swim much faster than an adult. So once you get that rhythm, you really don't need to hold on to the rope, right? But you can't stay in water. If you just continue to be in water and never come on shore, your body will start disintegrating. Yeah. So that's not possible, right? So we are land creatures. So we have to return. So in this body, right? So in this body, there is a rhythm. And while we can experience beyond that rhythm, this rhythm is what gives this body life. So we cannot really escape the rhythm without losing this body. Yeah. So that's something that we looked at, and we looked at and this rhythm is the clock of this rhythm, the biological clock of this rhythm is very situated on the compass on Earth. So a creature born in any other part of the solar system will not have this clock. It will be a little different, right? So we are specifically looking at the human body, the nature clock as it has emerged on Earth. Okay. So we looked at the day and night cycle and how the being doing rhythm kind of aligns with it. So we looked at the different gateways that through which we enter into each phase and we exit each phase, and the peak of each phase. Like if you look at the being to doing rhythm, which is 3 a.m. to 9 a.m. So 3 a.m. is the entry point of this light transitioning from being to doing rhythm, but it's also the exit of the being rhythm. So that point is very, very powerful. It's a transitionary point. And many times people say they wake up at this point. So it is important, if you wake up, instead of engaging into doing, honor the being, honor that deep quietness, or maybe you came out of a nightmare, something. So just give yourself this quietness to just sink into there, be there. Maybe you might fall asleep, or maybe you might just be in this awareness. Yeah. So both is okay, but don't go into engagement. Yeah. And then 9 a.m. is the beginning of the doing phase, but 9 a.m. is also the exit of the being to doing phase. So 9 a.m. is a powerful time as well. So these clock times really help us be conscious of this transition. Yeah. And 6 a.m., like the dawn time, it is not exactly 6 a.m., it's a dawn. And I say dawn is only because based on light, this will kind of move up and down. And this time is the time when darkness and light have an exchange. It's almost, I see it like there's a balance, there's an equal, in the sense that darkness hands over the baton of the light and gives it to light and says, I cannot follow you there. Yeah, so it's go. And in the same way, the 6 p.m. dusk is about the other way, light giving it to darkness and staying back. Yeah. So we looked at this clock. So these are very important times, and I call it metamorphic because many, if our unconscious, can really come in through these times if we are not present. And so these times to tread consciously, slowly, is important. Yeah. There's in the same way, the same clock of the 4 phases and the 8 metamorphic pit stops also meet us around the 365-day clock of the year, 365-day clock of the seasonal clock. So here I have the entire season. I'm showing the alignment, right? So you can see that January, November through January is connected to the being cycle in the Northern Hemisphere. And February through April is connected to the being to doing. May through July is connected to doing cycle. August through October is connected to the doing to being cycle. Yeah. And the peak of each, like this December, when Capricorn, tropical Capricorn begins, which is winter solstice, is when is the peak of the being phase. So in the same way, summer solstice and the beginning of Cancer, tropical Cancer is the beginning of the doing, is the peak of the doing phase when light is at peak. In the same way, the dawn corresponds to the equinoxes. Dawn and dusk corresponds to the spring and the autumn equinox. So there you have that as well. When light and dark are equal, one passes on to the other and says, hey, go. So that's friends. So dark and light are not enemies. Dark and light are close friends. One cannot exist. In fact, light cannot exist. Light cannot even be seen if there's no darkness. Yeah. And so we need the contrast of the dark to really enjoy the light. Yeah. So then there we have the spring. So February through April, the Northern Hemisphere merges as spring. And in the Southern Hemisphere, this will be autumn. These months will be autumn. So it will be, still there is spring. So spring would be now August, September, October would be spring in the Southern Hemisphere, and summer is May, June, July in the Northern, and it would be November, December, January in Southern Hemisphere. And then we have autumn, which is the fall, falling of leaves. Nature makes room as more and more darkness and coolness ascends on earth. Nature really makes space for sun rays to reach us in winter, so it doesn't get too cold and we survive. I mean, just the compassion of nature and how this has come into existence, right? So, and we know this happens because the earth is rotating around its own axis and around the sun. So 365 days is that the amount of time it takes for the earth to move around the sun. And to know more about this, I would invite you to watch the seasonal one. Exactly why do we have these northern and southern hemisphere seasonal differences and all that. It's discussed in that particular video. And then here we have the key points. And then I also have these transition point and the symbolic equinox. These are all Gaelic calendar. So the pagan calendar of the old European culture. In the same way, India, we have our own calendar that through which with Shivaratri is when our spring begins. We call it like symbolic, we have Shivaratri. And then that whole springtime is the time of peak festivals. And we all has this been discussed. So I will invite you to watch that particular video. And then you have all these, so you can look at the timelines here. Yeah. And then we have the moon cycle. So the 29.5 days of the moon also align with this. So if you see, so many layers of influences are forever impacting our body. Yeah? And in the same way, the moon also has the 5th waxing to 11th waxing moon is the spring of the moon. Yeah, when the light is increasing. And then you have the same way 12th waxing to 4th waning is the moon phase, which includes the full moon, which is connected to the peak. And then you have the 5th waning to the 11th waning, which is connected to the being to doing phase, doing to being phase, or the autumn of the moon. And then, of course, you have the winter moon, which is winter phase of the moon, which is the dark moon. So it is from the 11th waning to 4th waxing. And so you can see the metamorphic pit stops here. They are the 4th waxing and waning, like 3 p.m. and 3 a.m. And then you have the 8th waxing and waning, which is the equinoxes, dawn and dusk, similar to that. And then you have the 11th waxing and waning, which is connected to the 9 a.m., 9 p.m. gateway, the beltane and something. Yeah. And of course, then we have the dark moon and the full moon. Now, into this clock, we also spoke about the elements, yeah, how the elements move, yeah, how during the night time, body becomes heavier so we can really rest and space opens up. Yeah, so inside, fire goes inside, all the inner activities are happening. The mind has to descend, the mind, which is the air, the subtlest aspect of who we are, has to really settle down, come into the body. Otherwise, we cannot, the being space doesn't open up. And then the same thing is true with winter, you know. So then, so it's kind of in winter, there's a hibernation, there's a slowing down, there's a heaviness, and fire, belly fire increases. Then as spring comes, as morning comes, as moon's waxing comes, there's an increase in this warmth. So moon is very much connected to a night rhythm, right? So moon impacts so much of our night cycles. So naturally you can see ice melts and warmth comes, water flows, earth returns to life. So spring is that, this burst of life. And then of course, abundance happens in summer, in the season of summer. In the same way, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. clock is a great time, you know, to be in engagement activities, cooperation with people, team, joy. So you really protect your heart during this time. And during when the sun reaches peak, like closer to the solstice or the peak noon time, you have to have your meal, otherwise the fire can cause more havoc in the system. So many of this, so this is the fire time. Really, fire is the king here. Yeah. So if you don't attend to your fire during this time, your fire will keep debilitating. Your ability to really be in your inhalation and in your life keeps debilitating. And then, of course, you have the autumn, again, when air gets really dominant, predominant in both spring, actually, and in autumn. And autumn especially, because things have to shed. So these are the practices, this is the time in all these in all these interconnections, you will notice this. Air means subtle, so really psyche related, mind related things can really pick up. So you have to give yourself extra support to calm yourself down, to come back to the body, keep coming back to the body. Yeah. Otherwise, the next phase doesn't open up. It becomes really difficult. We're not able to rest when we really need to claim rest. Yeah. So this is what we know. And now I'm taking you into, this is common. This much what I've shared is common to all humans. Yeah. All humans, male or female, we have this interconnection in the body. The moon affects the mind. For both men and women, it has an impact on our mind and our psyche. And during the day clock, this waking up, this rhythm is connected, since it's cellular biology, it is connected to all our organ system, functionality, same with the season. Till here, as male or female, we have, it impacts, it has this. So here I wanted to kind of show the knowing or the wisdom, different kinds of wisdom that we have access to. One is our intelligence, and this is not mind and thoughts. I'm talking about, when I say intelligence, I'm really talking about the frontal cortex, yeah, our brain, the top part of our brain, which really becomes open when the rest of the body is really relaxed. Yeah, so when we're very calm and centered is when knowing, or this head wisdom, really makes itself known to us. And then we have the safety. So this is our gut wisdom. Today we know that 80% of information is always being sent from our gut to the brain. So based on what's happening here, our body is influencing hormonal activity in the body, our mobility, our emotional quotient, how we see the world, how we perceive, how our senses show up. All that is very much directed by the gut wisdom. So when this is not calm, so whenever this is activated, this whole region from chest, center of the chest to our This whole thing is called the gut. The esophagus down, this whole thing is the gut. I've just shown that part. This gut, so this is connected to safety. So this is the gut knowing. So you have to really tune into your gut and see, it doesn't have language, but there is a knowing. You know that you cannot be here. So then you have to draw back. So this is another wisdom that is forever available to us. Some danger, some threats, something. And because of our mind, mental activity, and the mind being there in a human being, we are many times the gut may or may not be the truth, but really doesn't matter. If the gut is activated, you have to draw back, find your center, and only then look into anything. Yeah, wherever you have gut is not like too much anxiety or indigestion or stomach has tightness, then it's better to not engage with whatever that is. Just to step back, breathe, relax, and then see. Okay, so this is another kind of wisdom that is always available to us. And then, of course, our heart, which I call the seat of God, seat of divine, seat of consciousness, seat of the being. Yeah, so that is our essence. We are our authenticity, a truth. So heart wisdom. So at any time as human beings, we have access to all these three, right? But as female, I just wanted to show the shift that I just did, yeah, in the image. As female, human female, we have an additional compass. And that compass is what we will start looking at in this journey. And here what I want to kind of, I'm sorry, I just kind of went back. And we once again doing a little. Okay, and yes, we looked at these three wisdom. And now, this still here, everything is the same, but now we are going a step deeper into being a woman. And what does that mean? Being a human female. Yeah. And we looked at the life cycle of a human female in the last video, and consisting of how her whole life can be mapped on this, right? So we looked at the maiden phase, which is connected to I am kind of not able to see because of certain things. I'm just going to make this time. Okay, yeah. So so maiden, so 8 to 24 years of a girl. Yeah, 0 to 8 is on that axis of the embolic that you can see. So 8 to 24 is the maiden. So the becoming of a woman, being a human female, starts here with the womb awakening. Yeah, with the womb rhythm beginning. And then, so here you have that. So this is the womb wisdom. So it is in the maiden blossoming that I call it. So a girl doesn't become or grow into a woman. A girl blossoms like a bud breaks and becoming a woman. She becomes a woman. And that is where she has access to nature's rhythm. So you see that particular hand gesture. I will show that to you in a little bit, but that's where exactly there, down in the pelvic region, that is where, in that sacred triangle, is where women's wisdom is. So womb wisdom. So women, in addition to the intelligence, essence, and safety, which is connected to 9 gates of awakening, women have additional 3 gates, which are connected to her womb and her breast. So if a woman becomes pregnant and she gives birth, then she has 2 additional, which are the holes in her breasts through which milk flows, and then, of course, her bleeding or birthing hole through which life comes. So that's another opening. So that is 3. So 9 plus 3, 12. So a woman's wisdom consists of 12 gates. So she has 3 additional. So in addition to these 3, you also have to really tap into your womb wisdom. And in today's modern world, most women are completely unaware of what's happening in their womb, because the male defined society that we live in, there has no need to acknowledge the womb because it doesn't have it biologically. So it's missing, it's absent. Yeah, and that shows our inability to rest. Yeah. And so in women, the nature rhythm, this whole rhythm that we are talking about is very much part of a woman. So from inside, there is something happening for a woman. So she cannot deny it. It's part of her body. Yeah. And her hormonal activity, her emotional, social, relational, everything is connected to that. And then 24 to 48 years, we saw, and the life cycle is connected to the mother creatrix abundance, just like earth and summer, ovulation. So we will look at how the womb it shows up. But here I'm just recapping the life cycle. Then the queen, we saw the queen and visionary. This is, I feel, when a woman reaches 40 is when her best years of her life begin for her. That's the best. And then it's all amazing. If she is really starting to tune into her body and womb by then it's the best time that's coming ahead of her. And then this is also, so queen phase is also when her bleeding pauses. Yeah. And then comes the 64 to 80 years of a woman's life, which is extremely powerful. And these crones are really becoming fewer and fewer in the world because of the trauma cycle and of women's disconnection from the womb and disconnection from nature. So now I want to also show you the gateway. So 80 to 8. So it's not one day of the year or just that year. The entire time you're on this metamorphic time. So 0 to 8 years of a girl's life, she really is in the crone phase of her life. Actually, she's not even crone, she's in between. But she has access. So if anyone's nearness would really give her comfort, it is the crone. Because there is a knowing there of something very, very close to her. And then comes maiden aspect of her life. And then she moves, that is 16 years is the peak of being a maiden girl. And then 24 is when it's exiting out of maiden and it is entry into being a mother. Yeah. And mother, when I say, it's not just birthing, but it's this energy which is very much part of nature. And then 32 is the peak of that. So many times the pain that we have kind of not paid attention to in the maiden, or the things that we have not received, can really peak at 32. The fire can really rage havoc in a woman's life. And then, of course, 48 is when she's entering into the queen year. So 32 to 48 in this modern time is one of the most excruciating time in the inner world. Many women don't even show it, what they're going through, the depression, all kinds of things can happen, and you really have to start looking at it. Okay. And then is the peak. 56 is the peak. So 48 through 64 is exactly the mirror opposite of 8 through 24. So whatever was absent, missing in 8 to 24 will show up here if it's not been attended to in the mother cycle. And whatever 24 to 48 will show up in the 64 to 80. So if we don't agree to what has come already met as our own unique fate, then that will open up things for us in the crone phase of our life. That peak is 72. So this is something that we have reached till now. And now we are looking at the core compass of a woman. How do I walk every day of being a woman? And that is the menstrual cycle. And that is where we are going in this particular video. So here I have a very generalized clock, which may or may not be today majority women's. Yeah, maybe in my time of when I was young and bleeding, I'm still bleeding, but when I was young and in that maiden years, more of us might have been in this clock. Yeah, like 28 is an average menstrual cyclic days are 28, but it can range anywhere between 26 or 24 to 36. Yeah. And so you can see the various phases. I've used colors. So the first day When you say day 1 of the menstrual cycle, it is always clocked from when you start bleeding. Yeah, because that's the visible one. When you start bleeding is when we start clocking. Menstrual cycle begins from that day. And so that's the bleeding cycle. And then from the bleeding, so we look at each of these phases. That's the being phase. That's, you can see the connection to the crone, vice one, the dark moon. So there is, so in times when artificial lights were not so predominant, women bled with the dark moon and they ovulated with the full moon. So this is very normal rhythm, because moon is around 29 days. So women's bleeding and the moon cycle, they coincide quite a lot. And then post bleeding, when she comes out, she enters into the follicular or the pre-ovulation phase. Yeah, this is when her egg is preparing, the ovaries are preparing to release an egg. And and that is connected to spring. So she's in springtime. So follicular phase is like springtime. And then at the end of the follicular phase itself, she enters she enters into the ovulation when the egg is released. And this is a very short phase actually in the menstrual cycle. The fertile aspect of it is between 16 to 36 hours. And then the energy might still be there because the hormonal activity is still there for another 6-7 days. And then she enters into the premenstrual phase or the luteal phase, where things are kind of, where the body is, from the ovulation, this body is, actually luteal phase started from the minute the egg is released. We enter into an extension of 14 days of luteal phase. And this phase, at the end of this phase is when bleeding happens. So if egg is released on the 12-13 days, so it can be predicted that within 14 to 16 days you will bleed if you don't get pregnant. So this phase is quite predictable. This is the only predictable phase. Yeah. So ovulation and follicular phase is the indeterminate phase. Yeah, because it is very much dependent on the hormonal activity and the release of the egg. Yeah. So ovulation always precedes bleeding. So there is, even when a girl has a first bleeding, that means she had 14 days ago, her egg was released. That is why even if a girl doesn't have her bleeding, if it was her first egg release, she can still get pregnant. So these are things that we have to really inform our young girls, to know her body and to tap into and to know. So how do I know if I'm ovulating? So these are things that a girl really needs to be guided into. Yeah? And so this here, you can see the 4 phases. Yeah. And so here, to know the metamorphic pit stops are a little bit difficult. It's not that easy, as you can see, but the phases you can really, as you start journaling, tapping into your body, you can start knowing this shift. And of course, I just want to again bring back, so you can see that death and rebuilding is connected to the bleeding cycle, rebirth is connected to the follicular, rise and awaken, grow, bloom, blossom, how they're connected to ovulation phases. Then comes the unlearning, receding, reflecting, rest, restore, again, death and rebirth. Yeah. So you can start seeing this clock, how it is connected to the menstrual cycle. And now we'll go a little bit deeper into this. And here I have this image, which I drew a while back. And you can see her womb, her vagina, her breasts in the backdrop of nature and the moon. So from the first day of your bleeding, or a woman's bleeding, to the last day of her bleeding, every day of a woman's life, she is on the menstruation cycle. She's forever a changing womb woman, birthing, growing through inner spring and inner summer, shedding, dying through inner autumn. So the birth and death is continuously part of the menstrual cycle. Dying and being born physically, emotionally, psychologically, intellectually, socially, relationally, creatively, spiritually. This is happening forever in every cycle. So your menstruation rhythm is your navigation compass, because it's forever. You can look at it at, oh my God, so much is happening, but you can also look at it in every 28, 36 days, you have a fresh start. There is a reset in the body. You can completely reset and become fresh again. So if you really tune into this movement, this compass, and walk with the other rhythms in alignment, and we look at it how to do that, you will have a fresh heart, fresh mind, a new healthy body. Your relationships will feel renewed. You have a new burst of creativity, and your connection to your own heart and your own being and your spirit and spiritual self will feel renewed and refreshed. And so there is an opportunity as a woman to unburden every 28 to 36 days, which men don't have. Yeah. And so she is forever in rhythm. So her earth spiritual path. So a woman's menstrual compass is her earth spiritual path of dark and light, life and death. This is a woman's spiritual path. Yeah. You cannot ignore this and talk about any spirituality and enlightenment or realization that men's spiritual movements talk about. That does not apply to women, because as women start following that model, she starts losing out of this rhythm. So you have to be okay with that. You start taking on the male body, the male psyche, the male movement, and that's fine. That's what you want. Okay. So a womb woman doesn't need that. Yeah. There's something so deep, something so sacred that is given to her in this body of being a woman. This precious. And there, just resting in that, receiving in that, you will find such deep connection to life and death. Yeah. And so now I want to show this image. This is an image of a womb woman. Yeah. So our menstrual blood is one of the most sacred blood that flows. Yeah. It flows without a cut. And yet, if you look on in magazines, TV screens, movies, how many times have you seen this blood? Yeah. Like you will see the blood of killing, murder, sprawn on faces, the heroes wearing it on their shirts, and and such gory blood you see of killing. And yet this very sacred blood that is the release of death, that has no injury, that comes very naturally as part of a woman's body, is the most condoned and condemned blood. And it is not, it is the most sacred blood. And to be able to make room for that for women is very, very important, because without building that relationship with this blood, its smell, its sight, its touch, its feeling on the skin, and allowing and sitting in that, she cannot really have a relationship with this wisdom. So this was very important for me to say. So when a woman bleeds every month, all that is visible is that she is a woman, a mother, pulsating with her lunar rhythm. Color of her skin doesn't matter. Her religion doesn't matter. Her nationality doesn't matter. She connects all life in that moment she bleeds. So this is very, very important to acknowledge. The male rhythm, the male mind has created this so much of division in the name of God. Women never had that need. Yeah. So, and as we have started to follow a male compass, a human male's compass, we have forgotten our own direction, our own walk, our own path. So this is a call to remember and come back to our own womb rhythm. So what I'm sharing, what I'm bringing here on this journey, these are womb mysteries, women's mysteries. Yeah. And this is her domain. That when I say her domain, she knows what she's talking. So honor what a woman says. So I see many times men are teaching about menstruation and menstrual stuff. You have no clue what you're talking about. So allow the women, learn from her, let her speak her story, let her, because you don't have an embodied experience of this. Yeah. And each woman needs to find, trust, and know her own unique map and compass. This is so important. Yeah. So where do I begin? This whole being rhythm, this cyclic rhythm, where do you begin? You always begin with your blood, your menstrual blood, and that cycle. And you have to land in the body. If you're not in the body, you're constantly in the head and the mind. This wisdom does not become available to you. If you're on contraceptive pills, this wisdom is not available to you. And many other external things that we implant in our body, they also kind of really shift our rhythm. So really be very, very conscious of why you're doing that. And you can look at the moon for counsel. So the moon is a grandmother. It's been there. The moon awakened a woman to this rhythm. So she precedes us. She precedes our womb. She stands behind our womb, behind the line of all the women in our ancestry. Stands the moon. Yeah. There she is. And no other women. Every time we dismiss another woman, we shun another woman, we hate or dislike and are rageful towards her, we are doing it at our own cost. It has an impact on our womb. Yes, because women, when we come together, we bleed together. There is a sync. Our wombs are in sync. So the wombs are sync vertically going backwards this way and this way with women. So our wombs are connected with women here and wombs are connected to our ancestors, going back to mother, grandmother, and going forward to our own daughters and granddaughters and great-granddaughters. So we are in this, we are holding this infinite interconnected web. Yeah. And yeah. And this is the dark light rhythm that we follow. We walk the dark light rhythm. We are not linear. Our body is not linear. Our fat is not linear. Our emotion map is not linear. How we look is not linear. Our breasts are not linear. Our hip is not linear. Our weight, our color, our sensual experiences, all senses, they are not linear. They are cyclic. They change. Yeah? Our sex drive is not linear. Our sexuality is not linear. So these are things women need to know. We are constantly looking at men to find a direction. That's not going to work. Okay? And no man has jurisdiction. It's interesting. I did not plan the letters to come, the phrases to come this way. They are just coming exactly now how I did not plan. And that's the surrender that I feel that as a woman that I have really learned to trust. That is where it had to come, and that's when it came. No man has jurisdiction here. This is her domain. Okay, this is a womb woman's domain. And now I really want to bring your awareness to your blood and the maiden in you. These are beautiful women and girls who are now women. This was kind of a while back. And this was a menarche, menstrual workshop, 3 hours that I did with all of them in conversation. It was beautiful. And you can see the 3 girls, not the girl in the front. She is still the crone. She's in 0 to 8 years, but you can see the girls here and you can see that maiden blossoming here. Yeah, it's coming into being a maiden. And here I have this image so that you can start thinking about your own, that young girl, the little girl in you, 8 years old, 10 years old, 12 years old, 13 years old. And even going back to when you first got your bleeding. So I have a few questions for you. How is menstruation seen in your family, culture, or country? How was your experience of your first? When, where, how did she arrive? So you can see I'm naming the blood as a woman itself, because she is. What happened when she arrived? How old were you when you got your first period? What was the time like? How were you coming into that? Did you know anything about that? That particular day when you bled, day or night when you bled, where were you? Who was with you? How did that day look like? How did it sense like? How did it feel like? What emotions did you move through? Who guided, supported you through that first blood time? And how did that experience shape your relationship with your womb, your body, emotions, bleeding, women, and rest, as in resting? Yeah? And how and by whom were you told, educated about menstruation? And how was that experience? What were you told? Did you already know about your bleeding before you were told? Was there a ceremony or ritual or celebratory moment to support your blossom or this beginning of blossom? If you were to host a ceremony for your first blood now, what would it look like? Who would you invite now? Because a girl is still in you, yeah? And how would the girl in you respond to that? Yeah? So these are questions that I have for you. Yes, I'm going to invite you to maybe even pause here, do some journaling, writing, and see what opens up for you. And I'm going to continue. You can pause the video, make movement to really hold these questions. And this is that blood bleeding womb hole. So this is a cave-like temple from Malta. And they all the temples in Malta, the old temples, very much simulated the womb and the woman's body in the way it was constructed. And who, how, where is the little girl in you? In all her, yeah. So on this journey, this little girl is really invited to walk with you. Yeah, she's invited. And she's received in all her plurality, all her shades, all her shapes, all her colors, all her emotions, all her thoughts. So this is the question. When you started bleeding, were you invited into plurality or singularity? Because you are plural. You suddenly became everything. That's how a girl needs. Now she has so many aspects to her that she might suddenly not. So that's a very overwhelming time, because 0 to 8 is that singularity. Yeah, the interconnectedness, quiet singularity that binds. She's very much in that witnessing space. Suddenly bleeding opens up this plurality, but then she is told she's tied to be a particular way due to cultural, religious, male norms that women have taken on, that mothers have taken on in the name of culture, and in the name of culture bearers, women have taken on, in the name of patriarchy bearers, we have taken it on for men. And we have to bind the girl, yeah, tie her hands, tie her senses, tie everything, so she cannot experience this plurality, this multiplicity of who she is. And that is where begins our struggle. From since we are not allowed to blossom, it's like taking a bud and putting a tight rope around it, tying the whole bud. And so how will it blossom? And the way it blossoms is how we become women. Yeah. And so here I want to start with this video, and I will pause our journey in this video and make another one to go deeper into this journey. So I want to really show you, what does blossoming mean? I've been using this word again and again and again, and I'm sure that we hear, but we don't really listen. So I have this beautiful video of blossoming. And I want you to really let it land in your body as you watch it. And with that is where I'm going to pause for today in this video. And we'll continue the journey in the next one. Feeling that. And I would invite you now to kind of take some time to do some reflection on this blossoming, your relationship with that. The girl in you, how does she connect? What did she miss? What are the feelings that are present? And give yourself the time and space to allow and integrate what emerged for you, and we will continue the rest in another video. So blessed be. Blessed.